Well, I certainly have a story for this one. When I began writing Define Dixie, I was interested in including material. I was writing about radical Southerners who opposed Jim Crow in the 20-year period, 1920 to about 1950. And I decided to write about Black communists as the most radical of those people. There weren't a great many people from the South who lived in the South. Some had migrated who became Black communists, but one of them, who all I had was a photograph of him leading a rally, was Lovett Fort-Whiteman. And it said in the caption that he was from Fort Worth, Texas. So again, slim hope, but I followed it out. And I spent 3 days in the microfilm. The census was not digitized in the basement at Yale. And the archivist staged an intervention. That I was looking through the census trying to find him in Fort Worth, and they said, "You're not going to be able to do this. He must not be there." So I came back on the fourth morning, and bingo, I found him and his family. And that gave me a certain amount of information, A, that he was real, because you never know, and who he was and where he'd come from. In the late 1920s, the African National Congress, which he belonged to, where he was, exhorting fellow Black people to become communists, sent several people to Moscow, and Lovett Fort-Whiteman went. Lenin had founded a school called the University of Toilers of the East, the KUTV, and it was for third world people, but African Americans were considered third world people because they lived usually in rural areas. Lovett went there, and I knew that before I decided to go to Moscow to look at the Comintern records. The Russian archives of social political history had just opened 2 years earlier, and they had just allowed foreigners to come in a couple of years before I went. I was still afraid to go and look at the Comintern archives because it's scary and Moscow is scary. But I had an undergraduate who goaded me into doing it, and she went with me. She was writing on the Gastonia strike in 1929, which was led by communists. So we did. We stayed in a hotel where armed men sat in the hall on chairs all night. We went to it was midwinter, and we went to the archives, and there's this guy with an automatic weapon who just watched over us in a soldier's uniform. I had hired someone I thought would be a translator who had formerly worked in the archives, and I thought I would need a translator, but only the finding aids were in Russian. All of the material was in English and German and French and Russian. And so I could read, at least I could read the English and kind of read the French. It was an amazing experience because Lovett Fort-Whiteman was surveilled almost every day of his life in the Soviet Union, and there were reports. There were reports on what he was saying in his classes at KUTV. There was Ho Chi Minh, his classmate's report card in there. And he began to talk more and more about how race was just as important as class in the South. And he was right, of course, because the South had a form of racialized capitalism with African Americans falsely inflating wages for white people and kind of a pyramid sort of scheme. And they didn't really want to hear it because they're Lenin. This was heresy to Lenin. So I just watched as he talked himself into trouble day after day, not knowing that reports were going back to the Kremlin. And ultimately, they sent him to the Gulag. I even found a first-hand account of his death there. He said he was a broken man and died. I don't think I'll ever top that. Now, of course, the records that Moscow has chosen to digitize are available on in libraries on the web. But you have to be really careful that they've chosen the ones you want, for starters. And second, it was a priceless experience to go and do this really hard thing and have a ball doing it.